I will try to do this video as short and dense as possible, so let's start with the Simagic. That being said, if you are with the 50Nm or the Mini, you can keep the strength on 100%. I'm with the Ultimate, and as you can see, I keep that on 60%, which I will explain in a minute. For iRacing, smoothness filter is on 1, and for ACC and Automobilist I keep that to 0, but you can check 1 or 0 for all different sims. Wheel rotation speed to 100% for all GT cars or 20% for drifting and rally. Feedback detail maxed out to 20. Max torque is maxed as well. I'm not big fan of mechanical damper or friction, so I keep those to 0. I personally prefer to feel as much effects as possible while loading the tires into the corner, and you have to keep in mind those effects are artificial filters which will fight against the force feedback. However, if it's too light for you, I think the maximum suggested value before killing the effects is about 20% for both friction and damping. Just test and see how you like it more. Last is the force feedback frequency, and 5 is the one which smooths the force feedback effects and all the magnetic ripples disappear from the wheel, particularly in iRacing. Other effects, all to 0. Now, important note, I keep the strength to 60% for important reason, and if you are at 20Nm base and above but usually keep the force feedback low in the game, like to 12-15Nm peaks or even less, tend to be wrong, and for years I refused to believe that, but I've changed my mind. It turns out that if the base is close to clipping to the signal, gives more intense force feedback on the small effects, and the base just feels more alive. If you like, for example, 15 or 16Nm peaks, you can go to 70%, and if you like less, you can go to 50%. The ultimate goal is the signal itself to be close to that clipping point. I was against that for years and refused to even test. Well, I was wrong. Some may say it's placebo, but I firmly believe I feel more effects now and the bass is really alive. Probably that was the main reason I was always really impressed from 12 to 15Nm basses. They just naturally stay close to that clipping point for my personal like in terms of power, and that's the reason they were so alive to me. However, if you want to drive around 20Nm peaks, you can keep it 100%, but I doubt anyone used those torques. So, test it and decide for yourself. Don't be like me and think you know everything. Testing new stuff never hurts even there is no result. I will definitely love to hear from your experience. So, those are my settings for Simagic, and if you are interested, give them a go. Maybe we have the same taste, but if not, that's also absolutely fine. Don't stop tweaking till you find what you enjoy the most. Next one, Moza. On basic settings, 90 degrees for iRacing and 450 for the other sims. For road sensitivity, around 7 is the sweet spot for all bases from R5 to R21. Game force intensity 100% for all bases except the R21, which is around 70, as I explained previously. It really makes difference for me. The small bases already stay close to clipping and give it all, but for the R21 I have to go down to 70% to get all the effects in the 12-13Nm, which is the strength I personally prefer for GT cars. Again, try to stay close to the clipping limits and see for yourself if it makes difference. Wheel speed 100% for GT cars and rally or drifting down to 20. Spring and damper 0. Torque output is maxed, and for wheel inertia I just chose their suggestions for the different sizes. FSR is 280 to 300mm wheels, and CS and RS is for 320. Wheel friction 0, and as I've said, that wheel feels super light and unnatural in the straight line, but I don't like artificial filters to fight against the small details once I load the tires into the corner. And again, if that feels too light for you, you can add some damping and friction, but I personally suggest to stay below 20. Speed depending damping off and starting point at 400 km, which is basically off. Also, I never play with the force feedback equalizer and bass curve, as those already feels great to me. So that's what I like, and if you don't, it's perfectly fine. Force feedback is very subjective. Give it a go, and if it's not for you, just move on. Next one is the Cammus. I'm testing C12 right now, and this thing is impressive for what it is. I definitely managed to make it feel as smooth and detailed as the Moza and Simagic in around those 12 Nm peak torques. Power is maxed out, the next 4 options are basically 0, even the natural inertia, which for rally and drifting is up to 60. Effects are maxed out to 100, and the CI filter and Q factor are up to 100%, and those two filters bring the wheelbase to life and at the same time keep the effects very smooth. That can create some isolation if you take off your hands, but the bass is alive and buttery smooth. Again, no damping or friction, but if it's too light on the straight line, you can add damping and friction up to 20%. And here are my iRacing in-game settings. The max force will change from car to car, and I don't use the auto box. As my Simagic Ultimate is limited to 60%, I add wheel force 14 Nm, which is around the limits I added in the software. Intensity is for auto box, so I don't mind that, and smoothing, damping and minimum force are down to 0. So those are my favorite settings of those 3 brands, and I really hope some of you will enjoy it. Take care and much love, everyone.